welcome back to another episode of the DD Geopolitics podcast. I am Sarah, and I am back again with the one and only, my favorite, Mark Sleboda. Mark, how are you?
Sarah, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on Double D Geopolitics.
Double D.
And I, after that stirring intro music, I feel like I should be saying, Wonder Twin powers activate.
Or like we're summoning some sort of like army for like some great battle for our freedom from like the English Empire or something.
Yeah, Total War, latest edition. Right. Although I have to say, with the tagline, staring at the screen for the last 3 minutes, I actually noticed your tagline, transcending borders in a multipolar world. I have to say, with a tagline like that, you just lost the entire potential American Republican audience. As soon as we're talking transcending borders, boom, they're gone.
Yeah. Actually, that's funny that you say that, because it's very scary for people to even like wrap their mind around the idea from the West, because they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean multipolar? Like, we're not in charge anymore? What is they can't like wrap their mind around more than one pole because they're so used to the American hegemon. Speaking of the multipolar world, and our friends in Ukraine, another act of terrorism, the plane being shot down with Ukrainian POWs on board. What has the reaction been inside of Russia before we get through the roller coaster of emotions that Ukraine has been on?
Yeah, I have to say that the attitude in Russia is just like figures, Banderites. That's that is. I mean, there's a little bit of shock, but after that, it's like, well, okay, so 9 of our guys died. That's the concern. I don't think there is a whole lot of concern at this point if they surrendered, that's great. They're POWs, but it's hardly the first time that the Kiev regime has targeted their own POWs. I mean, they have a long track record of this. There was Yelenovka in 2022 in Donbass, which they hit with a HIMARS, right? And then somehow there's a CNN investigation that debunked it. I'm like, really? I mean, like, and I'm like, how did they debunk it? They debunked it. Okay, well, I mean, how? Oh, debunked it. Okay, all right, gotcha. Yeah, that was in the Wikipedia entry. I found that particularly amusing.
That was it? Just no citation, just
debunked it. Debunked it. Yeah. Well, the CNN, they went a link to CNN, who says they debunked it. I guess that's because they were on the ground. Actually, they weren't, because that was Russian-held territory, and CNN doesn't go there. But somehow they debunked it anyway. So that's ridiculous. But there was a similar event nearly a year later in Bakhmut, Artyomovsk, when Russian forces took that. They hit another detention center there, and I've lost track of the number of videos I've seen of newly surrendered Kiev regime POWs being brought back behind the lines in a Russian vehicle, only to see the vehicle being hunted down and attacked by FPV drones. I mean, I've lost track of the number. So they regularly, they have no respect or concern at the military level or at the political level for their own POWs. As far as they're concerned, they're traitors who, unless they got specific permission to surrender, which I don't think has ever happened, maybe Azovstal, though I even doubt that situation. So they're traitors, and they don't have any respect for them whatsoever. And actually, there was one of the POWs on that plane. His name is Constantine Danchenko. He did a video. He's been in Russian custody as a POW since near the beginning of the conflict, since 2022. And he did a video back then putting out how the Kiev political elite and the military staff, the general staff, just regard their soldiers as meat. right? He said that right out early on in the conflict then. And, we've just seen that. So I don't know if his comments in any small way weighed in, but they certainly were a particularly tragic foretelling. So the Russian government is very, very convinced that this was not an accident. This was not a fog of war scenario. That this was deliberate. That they deliberately targeted their own POWs, whether they were aiming for the POWs or whether they simply didn't care about their own POWs for a chance to say that they shot down another Ilyushin 76, whatever their current claim of what else was on that plane, notwithstanding. And they have the track record for it. I mean, there's no question about this. A similar prisoner transfer occurred using the exact same protocol, with a transport flying into Belgorod and then a drive with them from Belgorod to the Kiev regime-controlled border just 3 weeks earlier. Just 3 weeks earlier, exact same protocol. So, and I have to say, I don't know about you guys, but do you think that a Patriot or an Iris-T or whatever the system was that did it is regularly positioned in Lipsy? Right? Out there, out in front, just waiting to be targeted? No. Right? And we know that they've been doing this, playing this roving air defense in an offensive capacity now several times before. These claims of shooting down the AH-50 over the Azov Sea, the claims of shooting down, I don't know, was it 50 or 5 or 3 or 2?
All of them.
All of them, right? But they've been doing this already, right? Putting their air defense, hanging it out there, and then taking a pot shot and running away to try to grab headlines. And that's really all it is, right? It has no strategic value overall. But it appears to be that is whatever was going through their head with regard to the POWs. It seems that they knew the POWs were on that plane and they set up an ambush, right? Now, of course, for the families of the soldiers, they have to make some kind of show of pretending that they care about POWs, but obviously the track record denies it. And the comments by the Kiev regime, the Ukrainian quote unquote general staff, that they will continue to strike Russian transports because they regard them as a terrorist threat. I mean, you can't get any more, you can't expect any more an admission of guilt. And also, we don't give a flying F about the POWs as that, right? I mean, that they made that perfectly clear. There was no words of, tragedy or respect or nothing. Nope. Just we'll continue to do it. That was it. Not even in that statement. Not even the slightest bit of sorrow or anything, condolences, nothing.
No.
So it is extremely callous. It is vile in many ways, and all it's going to result in is that once again POW exchanges will be put on hold, which ultimately is going to far more affect Ukrainian families than Russian, because there are far more Ukrainian POWs taken by Russia than the other way around. And POW exchanges were already put on hold for over half a year, or almost half a year, because of these games they played with Erdogan and the return of the Azovstal. And there was no prisoner of war exchanges for months because Russia said, you owe us POWs. And for breaking that deal, and until you pay up, there are no more POW exchanges. And finally they did. If you'll notice, the first POW exchange, the last one before this one, was tilted by about 60 some in favor of Russia, which is pretty amazing. And that's the reason that they finally paid up what Russia considered their due for violating the terms with the Azov neo-Nazis from Azovstal that Erdogan, that snake, just handed over to Zelensky in order to appease NATO over his continued games over Sweden's NATO membership, which he got his sweetheart F-16 deal and was happy to cave on that too. He is a cunning and base beast. That's the nicest thing that I can say about Erdogan.
I'm glad we share the same opinion about Erdogan.
Yeah, he will, I don't know whether what he does is actually to Turkey's national advantage or not. That's not my call to make, but it is definitely to his own and his enriched family's advantage. We'll just say that. So all it means is the prisoner of war exchanges are going to be put on hold again, and no matter what kind of ridiculous claims they're making about, who was on the plane or what they didn't know, no one really believes it. And I doubt increasingly that people in Ukraine believe it. So another chip at the credibility of the regime with its own people. So that is the only result. I hope they're happy. Medvedev, I know, has suggested that it's due to some type of internal feuding within the regime. We've certainly seen plenty of that, but I haven't seen anyone go. I was almost expecting Zelensky to come out and start blaming Zaluzhny, that it was all his responsibility, and it may happen yet. It may have either been arranged or at least exploited as a convenient way to get rid of Zaluzhny, but we haven't seen that yet. So at least on that one, I didn't really make a call, but I suggested that it was a possibility, and that one's not panning out. So right now, it does seem that there's some general confusion, which does make me believe, at least from the administration, that there is some division, or that the political simply doesn't have real control over a lot of its forces. And that whatever they knew or didn't know, they chose to strike at this plane. Whoever was on it be damned.
Well, we went.
What else is there to say?
We went through a whole roller coaster of emotions with Ukraine, and their social media army went from yes, we shot down the plane to wait, maybe we didn't shoot down the plane. Wait, we did shoot down the plane, but Russians are lying about what's on it. But wait, then they published this video, which I think we have of a Ukrainian POWs getting on the plane. Yeah. If area. So we have that video. So finally, they're willing to admit that maybe there were Ukrainian POWs on the plane, but that Russia was using them as human shields. Well, what is happening? And we've had more than one listener in the comments say Ukraine's Hannibal Directive, and that I can't stop making that comparison between Israel and Ukraine. Do you think that Israel's actions as of late, I mean, Ukraine was already pretty reckless to begin with, but do you think that Ukraine's kind of cheating off the exam of Israel right now and kind of taking a cue out of their books with the way that they're kind of handling this? I don't remember them ever really saying human shields, except for in the very beginning, maybe when talking about Donetsk city or something along those lines. But now to say that you're using them as the POWs as human shields, and that kind of excuses us shooting them down.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's so much a direct link to Israeli claims, which are, you know, equally ridiculous, but I mean, it is a thing that has fallen back on at times of desperation in almost every situation. I'm sure I'm not the only one who watched that video of the wreckage and got eerie, you know, deja vu chills from MH17, and the parallels with that situation are certainly not something to be completely neglected in this. And while, I mean, I think that those POWs were fools to be fighting for this regime to begin with. They did the only sane thing at some point and surrendered, and that they deserved better than the regime that took their lives. That's all I'll say. They deserved better, whoever they were, unless they were professional Nazis, and then they got what was coming for them.
Well, I believe some were professional Nazis, but that I don't think that negates the fact that they were still Ukrainian POWs and that they were on their way, what they believe they were on their way home. And that we're not getting any, we haven't gotten a single statement from the United States. Nobody's even said anything. They had all had something to say when Ukraine bombed the Christmas market. You know, this was self-defense or whatever the French said. And then America kind of turned their other way. But nobody's really said anything about this plane.
They're not going to. They don't care about the Ukrainian POWs. And at the end of the day, for them, this is an existential conflict for their hegemony. They believe, I mean, they turn it differently. U.S. global leadership is at stake, right? Hegemony. They believe their hegemony is at stake at this conflict, and they are not going to give an inch on anything. So, you know, just forget any possibility of any moral or emotional or any other reaction. You won't get a single inch from the West on this.
Somebody in the audience said, I think it was a French system that shot that plane down. The French were quick to point to Patriot.
Yeah, they were.
But if it was a Patriot, Raytheon would be running an ad by now.
There is this funny thing with Macron in France right now, with these quote unquote mercenaries, French Foreign Legion that were killed in Kharkov. Evidently, they were fighting alongside the real. So the Russia Volunteer Corps, the neo-Nazis, the flaming Satanist neo-Nazis there. And remember, you know, there's this thing, the Russia Volunteer Corps, they're all Russians, right? Well, it turns out that they're not. It turns out that a lot of them are Russian and Ukrainian French Foreign Legion people who were buttressing the numbers of the Satanists of the neo-Nazis. And I don't say that lightly. Take a look at Moloch. I mean, if you're not familiar with the lead singer of the neo-Nazi, I don't know, death metal or I don't even know what the correct terminology band, where the O's are replaced with eights, 88, you know, Heil Hitler, haha. I did a few pieces on a few short videos on Twitter about who these people in the Russia Volunteer Corps are. They are the Satanists of neo-Nazis. And I don't say that lightly. They actually worship Hitler as a living death god, right? Literally. I mean, yeah, these are the really cool ones. Even the New York Times admitted that they were neo-Nazis. They didn't even try to hide. At least once they did. So this is who the French Foreign Legion was with. And obviously, Russia had enough evidence, and they summoned the French ambassador, over exactly who these people were. And it was right after that Macron made a statement: "We're not at war with Russia," right? So obviously, he was freaked out a little bit. So when this incident came along, the French were real quickly to say, "Oh, it wasn't our system. It wasn't our system. It was the Americans," which I thought was hilarious. Whether it was a French air defense system or an American, there's not enough evidence for me to guess, right? As far as I'm concerned, could have been an Iris-T too. I don't know that, but the French are definitely pointing the system at an American Patriot, which should lead you to be a little bit suspicious, but there is that. So there's a whole sordid affair here with the French Foreign Legion in Kharkov, this plane being shot down just 100 kilometers from Lipsy. So this is all in a very tight circle of incidents there, and I'm sure that there is some type of definite connection there. Whether we're making that connection exactly yet or not, I'm sure that there is a connection.
So we're going to segue over to Avdeevka, which is probably the next large city that will be liberated by the Russians. I think we have a kind of a video.
Not actually that large, but
it's still a benchmark. It's a
fortress city. Yes,
right. It's large in the sense of difficulty, I guess I should say. Nobody's been left in Avdeevka.
It is Avdeevka is the most difficult. I mean,
it's the most fortified city in the world. Like, people don't understand that.
It's more heavily defended than Ugledar, right? I mean, more difficult in total to attack. Of course, if Avdeevka and Novomikhailovka are rolled up, then Ugledar becomes much easier. Again, there's some people out there who, noticing, all the problems that the Kiev regime is having with shell hunger, with not being able to get financial and military aid still from the Americans, with, for whatever reason, still tossing around the hot potato of mobilization, they got me using that word, the mass forced conscription of 500,000 more Ukrainian citizens to defend the regime. They're still tossing that around. I suspect it's because they need Western aid to pay the salaries, and they have no hope of covering it otherwise without printing the hryvnia into non-existence. So that's probably more the reason why the conscription hasn't passed the Rada than anything else. But with the shell hunger, the financial, economic problems, the manpower problems, they're even reporting a drone shortage now. And Russia has all these advantages, right? Yeah, I mean, they're dropping fabs like crazy. They rolling out the coalition, this new most advanced artillery system in the world with the liquid cooled barrel and everything. The reactive targeting. All of these advantages that Russia has now, and it's still tough. It's hard because offense is hard, even with all the advantages in the lineup of forces in this near peer competitor with NATO still, even with the current hiccup backing the Kiev regime to the hill. I know there's some people that call themselves analysts out there saying it's all over, the game over, Russia won, we'll be in Kiev in 2 months or some ridiculous. These people are fools. These people are not serious. Do not listen to them. There is a long, hard, bloody slog ahead unless there is some political collapse in Kiev. Right? There is no military collapse. All the pressure that the Russian military is putting on them, right, all along the contact line, Avdeevka and everywhere else, and they're buckling, but they're not breaking anywhere. I am continually shocked, surprised, horrified at the extent that this regime has gotten ordinary Ukrainian men and women, right? 1 out of 6 women, to fight to the death for this group of elites in Kiev, these Maidan elites. It's continually shocking to me and horrifying how well they hold and fight and die for this regime. And, forget the Banderites. We know, their ideological beliefs, but they're not all Banderites. We know that, right? That's, I don't know, 20-25% max. So this is tough, and Russians will continue to die to see this to the end. Do not expect some collapse so you're going to wake up one day and the AFU is just going to say, oh, we throw in the towel, we're done. Not going to happen. I wish it would happen, and I sincerely hope to all the gods that I'm wrong on that score. And if it happens, feel free to call me on it.
I don't think it will happen. I think I think that one of the listeners actually said something like the plan is obvious. They're going to move the capital to Lvov and are making noises about NATO membership for Western Ukraine. Is Russia going to just accept that, annexing East Ukraine, and that's it? I don't think I've talked to you since at least the holidays, but there was a speech that Putin did in there where he talked about Transcarpathia, Transnistria, Bukovina, a couple of other areas that he was thinking of giving back to the border countries.
Let's be frank. That's Putin trolling NATO, right? That's the Putin playing game, right? There is whatever the most conservative and nationalist Hungarians or Poles may dream in their masturbatory fantasies, they are still part of NATO, and NATO is ruled by the United States, and the U.S. will never let Hungary take Transcarpathia, or Poland to scoop up Lvov. It's not going to happen. Maybe it makes for effective Russian propaganda to suggest that it might, but it's not going to happen. So,
well, then what happens in the West? Because I mean, I believe that we need to take Odessa. That's not. There needs to be a land bridge.
Absolutely. If we don't take Odessa, then Putin has failed.
I agree. So, what happens?
The whole East Bank, the East and the South, at a minimum.
No sovereignty,
and that
no shore.
That is right there. The whole East Bank. That is another 3 years at least. Let's be honest. This is when they say that when the Russian says they're prepared for a long conflict, they're not joking.
I think people forget Stalingrad and Leningrad. Don't really know about Russian patience. They'll say, "Oh, Russia, Kiev in 3 days," and I'm like, that was never a Russian plan. That would never be.
So what happens? A rump state that in West Ukraine, right? That the West will claim is the only legitimate government of Ukraine, right? And we'll be back to a new Berlin Wall, Cold War divide. I mean, that is what it is. We will not move into West Ukraine because it would be suicidal. But hopefully it has left a rump state, hopefully, without access to the sea. But it will be there, and it will be a forever war. Those people will never stop fighting. I said this my very first interview from the start of the conflict. It's out there. And I was there with someone else who is a very popular, widely regarded analyst. And I remember we were sitting there and he's like, it's over in 2 months. And I said, forever war. And you make your judgment call as
I think I know who it was.
Yeah. I'm not going to name names, but you knew who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I don't remember ever feeling like it would be short. I remember when we got to the winter of 2022 and just seeing where we were politically and militarily. I was like, no, this is going to be quite a slog. So
in the past 2 weeks, have you been paying attention to Sweden, the Netherlands? I mean, the Baltics have always been this way. Have both told their citizens to prepare for war with Russia. I mean, to the point where they need to stock up their cellars with bottled water and stuff, right? The United Kingdom's the outgoing defense, top military person in the United Kingdom, the outgoing one, just suggested that the UK needed to enact conscription of its citizens to fight the coming war with Russia, right? And the current defense minister, Grant Shapps, essentially said very close, right? That the war with Russia, right? Now, Stoltenberg has kind of walked that back in the last few days. Germany has said, we're going to war with Russia. No, we're not, and this conflicting, but notice already, right? Kiev isn't even under threat yet, right? And probably won't be for another year, right? Or maybe, I don't know, barring some big arrow offensive this summer, which is not impossible. But anyway, it's not under threat yet. And they're already talking about war with Russia. If Kiev comes under threat, NATO or a coalition of the willing, US, Poland, the UK, the Baltics, will put forces in West Ukraine. And the only thing that I'm afraid of is, will they put forces across the border from Romania into Odessa? That is my nightmare scenario of how this blows up into a possibility of World War III. Because if they put them in the West Ukraine, we'll probably scream and bitch and promise, but I don't think we're actually going to do anything at the end of that. Unless they make offensive actions, because they'll be put there under the guise of peacekeepers or some ridiculous nonsense. They don't have what they need for a land war, right? They don't have the artillery for it now, right? They wasted every cell they have. All they've got is air power, and I think they've started to realize how they can't defend on that. But they'll be counting that those human tripwire forces that Russia will not attack them. The only question is, if they move troops into Odessa, I think we'll threaten, and if they don't move, then we'll hit them in Odessa. Odessa is a different story. Putin has continually been recently referring to Odessa as a Russian city, which it is, right? I mean, if you've ever been to Odessa, you know the people there, you know what is going on there. So that is my nightmare scenario, and I made videos about it more than a year ago. They're on my YouTube channel. I said it how many times on Sputnik? This ends with the West going into West Ukraine.
So
if that's a big end, like the end of the world, or just a small end in a frozen conflict or something, but that's the way this ends.
Well, I think that it's interesting that Europe is tasked with getting ready for a war with Russia, full-scale war, but the United States is tasked with getting ready for a war with China. So, I mean, just in the media, the news, get ready, it's 2 years to war with China. And it's like, are we asking for a world war? And
yeah, they are. There's three different flavors of the blob, right? The foreign policy elite, the deep state, whatever you want to call them, in Washington, D.C. There's only three kinds, right? They all want war with Russia, China, and Iran. All of them. The only difference is, which one do they prioritize above the others? Right now, those who prioritize war with Iran are jumping out over the Middle East saga. The ones who prioritize war with Russia haven't shut up for the last 2 years now. And the ones who prioritize war with China are waiting in the wings at this moment, right? I mean, that's the only type of politician, of foreign policy elite, the blob that the U.S. has. Those are the three flavors. That's it. There is no realists. There are no, certainly there aren't any doves or anything of the sort. So that is where they are. But if you speaking of a coming confrontation and what Europe would be tasked with, notice that right now Romania has announced that the emergency, as they put it, construction of a highway system running up the Black Sea coast that will go through Moldova and Ukraine. Right? And it's such an emergency that supposedly corruption in Romania is not far off from what it is in Ukraine. Let's be honest. But that said, that's what they're saying, that they've got 3,000 people working on it, right?
I don't believe that there are 3,000 people working in all of Romania.
That is entirely a fair point, and I say that being an absolute lover of goulash. So it's Romanians out there, don't take it personally. I'm sure it's your government, not you.
It's not the people of Romania.
Yeah, it's
absolutely not.
But yeah. So, but that is being constructed as part of what they're calling the military Schengen. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I've heard similar things, and I hope you're right about the highway, but that's what they've announced. And until then, that's what I have to go on. It's being announced as part of this military Schengen, this supposedly way to expedite movement of, let's face it, American troops across the continent, right? That is what it's all about. And what is beginning now, Steadfast Defender 2024. This is the largest NATO military exercises since 1988. 90,000 plus troops. And this isn't a 2 weeks, the reservists come in and fire off a few guns and say they hit a few targets and go home. This is supposed to last for 4 to 5 months, right? Thousands of military vehicles, aircraft, cyber warfare, you name it, all across North and Eastern Europe. And the primary thing they are facilitating, that this is about, is a holding action, an engagement and holding action, while they facilitate the movement of tens, probably hundreds of thousands of American troops across the continent. This is what Steadfast Defender is about. So I hate to tell you, but I think that war with China is going to be put on hold.
I think so too.
I think
it'll just be a propaganda war for now.
The Biden administration, they wanted the Middle East to be quiet, which Blinken, blew that one up really well. They wanted the Middle East to be quiet. They wanted to finish off Russia quick and then move on to China. Well, the plans for the Biden administration are completely lost, and now they are faced with the prospect of losing another much more important geopolitical confrontation, which the people that run the Biden administration, we're talking Blinken and Sullivan and those around them, they seriously believe that Russia is nothing but Nigeria with snow, right? A gas station. They honestly, they so severely underestimated, had no respect, no fear, nothing for Russia. They thought Russia, they were going to, sanctions were going to wipe the floor with Russia. Oh, I'm never going to get that out of my head now. Thanks. Whoever just commented on Lindsey Graham.
It wasn't the person that commented it. It's that area decided to put it up on. Yeah. He didn't. That was totally unnecessary.
I'm never ever going to get that out of my head now. And yeah, I seriously believe it too.
Well, I mean, it is true, but I mean, we didn't need to bring it up today. But you did bring up Iran, so that's what I want to. I want to talk about. The thing that I've been looking at, and I don't I know I don't really like to bring Israel with you, but I have to because you brought up Iran, and Israel looks like they're using Iran to poke at Russia. This recent UN ambassador, the Gilad Erdogan,
But Iran's terror doesn't end only in the Middle East or Africa. Albania was hit with an Iranian cyber attack. And as we all know, Iranian drones are being used by Russia to kill civilians in Ukraine. Iran's terror will reach all of you. We all know this, even Russia, who collaborates with Iran.
So, like, I don't understand why, I understand it's all talk and bluster and stuff like that, but I think that it's interesting that Russia is always gets a bad rap as some weird, covert Zionist government, and now Israel's kind of like, well, you're preparing for Iran, so get ready for terrorism in your country. That sounds like a threat by Israel, not a warning.
Yeah. Israel is desperate right now, right? Their war against Hamas is not going the way some idiot imagined that it would be. They could have gotten away with a limited action against Hamas and let it be, but Netanyahu couldn't do that. And they haven't succeeded in wiping Hamas out. Even according to the Western media, they're nowhere close. And let's be frank, the standards for winning this game in Israel-Palestine are completely different. Israel has laid it out there. They need to wipe out Hamas. They said that we're going to wipe out Hamas, which they can't do without ethnic cleansing all of the Palestinians out of Gaza. There's no way to do it, right? That's still their end game. They still dream of driving them all into the Sinai Peninsula. But they're already talking about moving on to Hezbollah. And you're like, why? Because now they've got to double down or Netanyahu loses everything, right? So the U.S., contrary to, this is my reading, the Biden administration, at least most of the people of the Biden administration, do not want a larger Middle East conflict. Not now. Not these people. There are plenty of American government people, foreign policy elite, the blob, that do want war with Iran. And they're salivating right now, right? But the people in the White House, or at least the majority of them, that's not what they wanted. They're actually, I think, have been incredibly restrained by American standards with what they have done in response to repeated attacks by Kataib Hezbollah, by the Houthis, right? Which they rightly, to some degree, regard as, not 100%, right? It's not like the people have no agency, but calling them Iranian proxies, yeah, they're under Iran's influence, right? And they receive all the same things. And the U.S. is facing a proxy war right now, not at all dissimilar to the proxy war they're waging against Russia, right? And the standards there is they can provide everything, right? Financing, arming, intelligence, battlefield plans, wargaming, you name it. They can provide everything, but they're not a party to the conflict. But if Iran provides training and intelligence and arms to the Aran Salah, the Houthis, Kataib Hezbollah, then we're at war with Iran. That's the way some people want it. But the U.S. has been very restrained to this point. They just keep coming up where they have no good options, right? I mean, the Houthis are a screw, and all the U.S. has is a hammer, right? So they try to hit it with a hammer. That's all. At the end of the day, that's all they have. And Biden was perfectly honest. Will it stop the Houthis? No. But what can we do? Bang, 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 right? I mean, that's all they can do. And they're trying their best. That's restraint from the U.S., believe it or not, right? But still, Iran is pressing this proxy war, I think, fairly successfully. And by Iranian standards, they're also being restrained. They understand this is a game, and they're testing, right? They're playing with new ballistic missiles. They're testing new capabilities, their ability to transfer and so forth. But Iran could be doing a lot more, just like the US could be. This is them trying to dance around a direct conflict with each other. But Israel sees their only salvation in this whole thing is by blowing up a U.S. Iranian war, which is why they're trying to say that they're going to move on to Hezbollah. It's not an assassination. This terrorist attack on the anniversary of Qasem Soleimani's death, right? That was an Israeli terror attack meant to provoke the Iranians whoever actually did it, right? Mossad was behind it, right? And that was an attempt to provoke the Iranians into striking out and hitting the Americans in a way that America couldn't do anything but escalate directly back. Israel is desperate to provoke a direct war with the US and Iran right now. And they're going to keep doing everything they can to provoke that war. And, as a geopolitical Russian, as far as I'm concerned, my like kind in Iran and China are closer to my heart than the people in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, right? Or Belarus, whom, as far as I'm concerned, we can't trust that. Who's got our back in this conflict, right? Not Kazakhstan, right? Not Belarus, not really. Iran does. Come on. I mean, so as much as I prioritize Russia's relationship with Iran and China, if the U.S. is stupid enough to fall into a war with Iran here, for Russia, there couldn't be a better thing.
That's my takeaway as well. Like, I'm like, why are they pushing for this? This only plays into Russia's hands. I can't understand why. Like, there are a lot of people that do this whole weird pro-Ukraine, pro-Palestine thing, and I'm like, those two things are very contradictory. Because even I talked to Andrei Martyanov, and he was like, well, who's going to come first? Is it going to be the Russian-speaking people in Israel, or is it going to be the alliance with Iran? I mean, this is a no-brainer. You go with the furthering the interests of the country that you're in, Russia. And the way to do that is a strong alliance with Iran and China. So it's a very...
In the Kremlin and in Beijing, when they heard that the U.S. was launching airstrikes at the Houthis, right? They just must have been laughing their asses off, right? It's like, somebody break out the vodka, right? I mean, this is like...
Yeah.
Because that's a no-win situation. And the more they tie themselves, they're ruining their international reputation. There was a piece I think it was the Financial Times, already more than 2 months ago, that was an anonymous Western diplomat talking about the US's, but the larger West's relationship with the global South. And they're like, they were already not listening to us, but after the whole Israeli-Palestine thing, we've lost them forever, right? They'll never listen to us on Ukraine or anything else again. And they're going for broke now with the attacks in Yemen and, completely disregarding an ICJ judgment, however partial. I mean, that's it. I mean, they have successfully made a global South that wanted nothing more than to stick their heads in the sand and play neutral during a second Cold War. They're successfully pushing them wholesale into Russia and China's hands. I mean, the number of idiotic diplomatic missteps by this White House diplomatic and domestic political missteps. Speaking of this nonsense in Texas, while they are trying to get a Ukraine aid package through Congress through a border security compromise, this administration is one, just hands down, right? I don't like Republicans. I don't like Democrats. I don't like any American political flavor. But this administration is hands down, they're worse, they're more idiotic than Donald Trump's administration was. And the best thing I can say about Donald Trump's administration was it was a chaos bomb. That's the best thing I can say about it, is a chaos bomb.
Well, there was no foreign policy to be spoken.
No, I mean, there is no thought, there is no foreign policy. He went in saying he's going to improve relations with Russia, and then he brought in John Bolton and Pompeo and ended up with the worst relations with Russia up until that point, right? So how many rounds of sanctions, all this nonsense. Trump is only useful. I mean, sorry, those of you who are Trump supporters in the U.S., I know you're out there. You follow me sometimes on Twitter, right? I'm glad you do, and you're hearing some sense, but Trump is not going to save the U.S. He's not going to save the world. He's not a friend of Russia. He's a chaos bomb. And the problem with a chaos bomb is you never know exactly, as long as most of the blast goes off in the U.S., that's great. But, you never know exactly where some of that blast is going to go. That's why I don't. Lavrov said it outright. If Trump wins the White House, nothing is going to be any different, right? It's not going to change, right? Because the U.S. president doesn't control U.S. foreign policy. He doesn't. And Trump proved that, right? I mean, the neocons were brought in to run his foreign policy for him. And whatever leverage they had over him, or whether he just, follows whatever the person who spoke to him 15 minutes ago said, it's kind of moot at a certain point. But this is where this is going in the Middle East. Both Iran and the U.S. want to avoid, again, not everyone in both countries, but the people that are in power in both countries still want to avoid a direct conflict now. Doesn't mean they never want war with Iran, but they just realize how inconvenient it is now. Think of all of those tens of thousands of artillery shells and air defense missiles that they've provided to Iran that they could be providing to Ukraine instead, which is why, I see what's happening there. And to me, it's just lulz. I mean, that's a terrible thing to say, and it's certainly not what I feel about the Palestinian people. But from a geopolitical armchair perspective, what is going on in Palestine, however terrible for the Palestinians, is very good geopolitically for Russia.
It is, and yes, that's from a completely detached, emotionally
and China.
Yes, exactly. And I keep on. I had Carl Za on this week, which was a fantastic episode. Then literally,
he and I are great. We've done multiple videos together.
The title of the episode was "Do Nothing, Win," which is literally the Chinese strategy. I mean, we've watched them go through the Bab el-Mandeb. They have no issues traversing the Red Sea. They offered to talk to the Houthis. They have a relationship with Palestine. And then the United States comes around and says, "Can you please help us with the Houthis? Nasrallah, they're attacking our ships." And China's like, no. And then it's just, can you help us now so we can get prepared to go to war with you in 2 years? Thank you.
It's completely, it's hilarious. The U.S., I swear, those people are such idiots. When they do things like that, when there was also an article where they talked that the U.S. hope in China was the hope that China comes along and does some diplomacy because the U.S. evidently is incapable of diplomacy. That China does some diplomacy to reopen the waterway. That is their hope, that they'll keep hitting the Houthis with airstrikes and cruise missiles until China does some diplomacy. Wow, it was an amazing.
Right, and that's the mental gymnastics. See, you really got to stretch before you start talking about American foreign policy, because you might strain yourself with the tremendous amount of mental gymnastics. Not let's get a leash on our Israeli psychotic rogue state and stop them from doing a genocide. It's China. Can you help us get through the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb while we bomb the people that are holding onto the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb?
Forget even, actually caring about the genocide and the Palestinian people. But a smarter U.S. administration would realize the diplomatic damage to the U.S. and Western position in the world that is being done when every Israeli official is opening their mouth, Palestinians genocide, Gaza genocide, every other word is out of their mouth is effectively genocide. And the Americans are like, oh, you should maybe not say that so loud, and just some advice. You think they would use some of that leverage, but when you got Anthony Blinken going there and saying, I'm here as a Jewish person, and the octogenarian, senile Weekend at Bernie's guy back in the U.S. saying, I'm a Zionist. I'm a proud Zionist. What do you
Somebody's going to clip that, and they're going to be like, look, Mark Sleboda is a proud Zionist who wants to, and then they're going to cut out all the genocide stuff.
Speaking as Joe Biden. But Carl, with that headline you ran with Carl, that's great. The Chinese are winning by doing nothing. And I even, sometimes I'm like, could you help a little more? Why
don't we play Carl's clip, because it's absolutely hilarious, where we talk about what's going on in Bab el-Mandeb and the Red Sea area. If you have that, pull it up. Maybe he has it. I don't know. But
anyway, I'm kind of like China. I feel like sometimes that the Chinese leadership is there, like leaning against the wall, looking back at Russia, slugging it out with Europe, and like, you got that? You don't need any help, right? Right? Which a little bitter, about to a certain extent. But you're right, Charles. China is doing nothing and winning.
And I think in this instance, Russia can do nothing and kind of win. I wish they would do more. They are making some moves in Syria, but I think that every misstep
I see. I think we're doing absolutely to the limit of our capabilities. I don't think we could possibly do much more.
Now, do you mean military capabilities, or do you mean political capabilities?
Total, right? A total assessment, right, of our geopolitical horizon, what we are capable of. Let's be honest, right? We're going to win Ukraine, right? We're going to beat all of NATO, but it is going to be a long, bloody, hard slog, right? And that is all to say. At the end of it, right, there's starting to be a realization in the West that when this quote unquote ends, however, it does end. And I believe that even for Russia, John Mearsheimer put it best, it will be an ugly victory. It will not be the perfect victory that we hope for. But whatever it is, that Russia will come out of this with the world's top military in everything, at least land forces, right? Of a land force based military, because of the combat experience that they're gaining, of the super incredibly fast evolution of Western weapons systems, of the numbers of officers that will have actual command combat experience. Russia's going to come out of this with the leanest, meanest, most powerful military land-based in the world. And there's starting to be a realization. They're no longer saying, they're not saying as often about, Russia's ripping out washing machines and so forth. Now they're talking about the Russian threat to NATO, right? And maybe they should be afraid. after they've been waging war on us for 2 years from a distance and thought they don't have to pay a price at all, maybe they should be afraid in Europe. Maybe they should.
I think they are starting to get pretty afraid in Europe, judging by what Germany is saying and the scramble to get into NATO, the scramble to get into a de-armed, very expensive defensive alliance that makes you a target. It's very psychotic.
There was a Saturday Night Live skit about NATO being a school cafeteria, and the whole idea was joining NATO is getting to sit with the cool kids at the lunch table, and that's all it is. It is elites who want to sit at the cool kids table. Finland, Sweden aren't becoming any more militarily secure. They're becoming less militarily secure by joining NATO. But it's a matter of their elites wanting to sit at the cool kids table. That's it. I mean,
but they're not even cool.
We understand that, but they don't understand that, right? Where they've been educated and how they've been accultured, right? They haven't served in the U.S. military like you and I have, right? They haven't been inoculated against that. They think they're cool. And I agree with you. They're not cool. They're not cool in the slightest. But Russia doesn't have trans soldiers and lesbian women. Well, I mean, I'll agree we don't have trans soldiers. I'll just leave it at that.
There are lesbian women, I'm sure.
There's lesbian clubs in Moscow. Come on. I mean, sorry. We're not Saudi Arabia, right? We don't like gay parades in the street, but we're not lynching them either. There's gay clubs all over Moscow. Come on.
All right, well, Mark, I'll let you go so you can get to the gay club in Moscow because we're at the top of the hour.
I'll be at the kitty cat one. Right?
You'll be at the lesbian one, not the gay bar. Okay, Mark. Well, Mark, let everybody know what you've got coming up and where they can find you.
I've got coming up. I'll be taking the rest of the weekend off to run my tabletop RPG game. But for the rest of you more concerned with the geopolitical stuff, you can find me on Sputnik. I don't know, 15, 16 interviews a week, right? But if you don't want to follow Sputnik Radio assiduously like that, follow me on Substack and Telegram. My Substack is always free. I post at least one interview a day there during the week. I repost them on Telegram. I'm also active somewhat on Twitter and Facebook, not at all, but I'm still there.
Nobody's active on Facebook anymore, not even Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
Well, that's another show. We'll get the clips ready. Say hello to the crows, and I am taking the weekend off too. But on Wednesday, I will see you guys with Scott Ritter. Thank you.